Hello everyone and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today I'm going to be doing my key takeaways for round 23, going through every game and talking about one specific point, potentially from either team as well, also both teams, and giving my explanation on why I think that's important. This is a new style for me because I have done some other sort of review style videos this year, and just with experimentation, I think this one could potentially be the one that I want for my future, and I'll see how it performs. But with that being said, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video as well. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video. Now, I am sorry if I do sound a little bit ill at the moment, because I am coming off the back of a bad week, essentially, where I sort of had some hay fever and cold stuff. But at the end of it now, and we'll be pushing through, just sort of like a hoarse throat at the moment. So, everyone's been through it. But the first key takeaway, it was Essendon and Sydney on the Friday night, and the two takeaways that I'm going from this are that Essendon need people other than Zach Merritt to stand up, and on a night where you are essentially retiring one of the best to ever do it in the 21st century for your club, and for you to not honour them in the appropriate way, I think is a bit disappointing. Now, obviously their playing list is pretty underwhelming, especially with how they've performed this year. There are very few players who have exceeded expectations. Obviously, we know how good Merritt is, but just aside from him, Durham obviously been a great year. He's a piece that they can use for the future. But how many players can you really say that have had outstanding years? Nick Martin's statistically been good. I don't think the impact is anywhere near correlative to how well his stats look. I think Jordan Ridley's always going to be one for the future, but he just has been hit by horrible injuries the entire year, which is also very unfortunate. But forward of the ball, Wright's had a bad year, Langford's had a down year, Stringer's been inconsistent in a contract year, Gresham hasn't been anywhere near as good as he was in the first few weeks when the Bombers were good, Perkins hasn't had a breakout year, Menzie and a couple of their other small forwards just haven't had that impact that some clubs need from their small forwards, which Essendon probably do. And their backline, obviously Mackay's had his problems with his handballs, but for the most part has been solid, but nowhere near his contract. It's just, there's not enough to really boost Essendon up from where they were last year, which is why they're basically doing the exact same thing. And if they want to push forward and want to keep going, that's where they need to improve. And back on the Heppel thing, I think for them to not give him a retirement game, even if he's just as a sub and he comes on halfway through the third quarter, to help put some energy into the crowd, that's so much better than just leaving him to bare bones, essentially, and just have a few photos with the crowd. I don't think that was the right thing to do. But for Sydney, a fair bit of it is off their midfield. It's potentially back. Obviously, Brody Grundy's not there. He has certainly struggled in the last few weeks. But players like Heaney's back. Warner obviously did play on the weekend, but had a fantastic last quarter last week. Goulden's always been good this year. I don't think he's really dropped his form. Mills has been much better. They're now playing Parker and Adams more in the midfield, which I liked. I always thought that you needed to split Warner and Heaney a bit more in the middle, because you need those aggressors, you need those physical bodies, and I really like it. And so for Sydney, they look to be back. For the Saturday morning games, it was Saturday afternoon games, Gold Coast Melbourne, I had that the future could potentially be past Clayton Oliver at Melbourne in the midfield. So there was no Oliver and no Petrarca on the weekend, and their midfield was fantastic. At one stage, I think Viney had 7 clearances and the next best was 1. And when you got Matt Rowell in the opposition, that's a fantastic stat. That really gets you going against Gold Coast. And Viney showed his potential. That also potentially raises his value to a team like North Melbourne, who have been linked with him. However, I think that Oliver specifically might be passed, not because his best footy is behind him, simply because Melbourne might look at other ways. They've got Rivers, who they've trialled in there. You could potentially play Windsor or Tolstrip in there as younger players. You've got Pickett, who's played in there. Obviously, you've still got your Spargos and Sparrows, who are other small forwards who've played in there before. Neil Bullen, but unfortunately he's traded. And then obviously the big one in Petrarca. If they do want to keep Viney, there's still a really good structure in there for them to build around it, and I really like it. But there's nothing for me to take away from Gold Coast, because there was nothing left in their season. There was a little bit left for Melbourne, but not anymore. For the other Saturday early game, it was the Giants and Dockers, and for that I have that Brent Daniels is the new Toby Green, orange is the new black, and I think he has been fantastic for them this year, backing up his really good year last year, and his form in the last few weeks have probably been the best of a small forward throughout the entire competition. I think he had like 30 touches, 3 goals. He was fantastic. He was probably the best player on the ground, probably battling with Tom Green. And I just think he's been the one in recent weeks to go into the midfield and provide that spark and get the ball going forward with some good ball use. He's been the one to break open the games, and that's what the Giants have needed, and I think has been super impactful. And so him and his performance, if he continues that, will be a big reason as to why the Giants might make a push to another prelim final this year. But for the Dockers, it just shows that there's still a fair bit wrong with this list, and that changes do need to be made. They couldn't find an answer to Jesse Hogan throughout the entire game. He had like 10 scoring shots. That's really poor as a strong defense that they pride themselves on. If you are allowing that and you're not changing much, then that's poor and that needs to change. Even though they want to be a defensively solid team, they've allowed a key forward who they know was going to be fantastic 10 shots at goal. So there still needs to be some change in goal in Fremantle's list. It's just where they want to use it. Because they've got draft picks this year. Do they want to go to the draft or do they want to go to the trade period? That's Fremantle's question. Also, the reason I'm looking down is because I'm a little no card here. That's why. The next game is the Lions Pies game, which was a very good game to watch that I didn't end up watching as I had an internship stuff to do on Saturday. The takeaway that I have for Brisbane here is that everything, in my opinion, depends on their front half, and off of that, their accuracy in front of goal. There was a fair bit talked about their selfishness and them not wanting to share the ball at all times to find the best teammate possible in front of goal, and I think that's valid. I think that comes with a fair bit of the Brisbane players, where there is a bit of that selfishness that I need to do it. But I just think that everything relies on Brisbane's forward half. I said this during the year, that if they want to get back to their best, that 2023 form, where they were unstoppable, it needs to be off of their front half, because that's their point of difference. It's very difficult to be able to stop Rayner, Bailey, Cameron, Danaher, all at their best form. And at times we've seen that this year. They had a streak of winning 9 games in a row, but when they're not kicking accurately, that point of difference is no longer there. So you're just sort of questioning what else can they do at an elite level. And their midfield's fantastic, but when they're supplying it to a forward line that isn't delivering, you're not getting that damage. And their back line is certainly susceptible. Darren Joyce isn't a finals level player, I'll say it that way. Not to be discrediting to him, he's been a good player for a few years, but he's just not a finals player. And for them, it's just whether they can get that back on track in the last game, because it's against Essendon and it's up there, so it could be a very big game for them, where they can potentially spread a margin if they're accurate and if they're unselfish and get their teammates involved. And for the Pies, I've said it's a bit of a disappointing season, obviously, but Nick Dacos is just a special talent, and he really could drive them for a few years with the ageing list, because there is a fair few older players in their Collingwood at the moment. The next game is the showdown, and that what I've talked about is for the Crows. They need a fair bit still. Obviously no Walker, but he's at the tail end of his career, and they need to find another piece. I don't think just Thilthorpe and Fogarty and potentially someone like Lukosius is enough for a key forward mix. It needs to be something else, and their midfield obviously is still just not at a level that will make the 8 on a consistent basis, and so that's where they need to find it. I like their mix of key backs. I do like a couple of their small defenders as well. I'm a huge fan of Michelini, and I think that they can find pieces around that, but they still need stuff in the forward half. And what I've said for Port Adelaide is that it could potentially be the last chance with either Houston or Ken Hinkley, because Houston has held talks with several Victorian clubs, at least from what I've heard, and obviously Ken Hinkley, they've potentially discussed a succession plan with him, and so this very well could be the last chance, because I don't know if I see them doing this again without Houston, and then that becomes without Ken Hinkley. The other Saturday night game was between the Saints and the Cats, and for the Saints, I've said that whilst they do like to play this way, obviously when the end of the season comes around, they did this in 2021 as well, start slow, and when the pressure's off, you can perform really well, and they built that into a good year in 2022 at the start, but then faded later. I think that a lot of noise has been about how they play, and it's a boring game. That's not true. We just cannot capitalize, especially when we turn the ball over. When we force teams to turn the ball over in our front half. We've never capitalized on it until recently. A lot of that was when Max King out, but I think that at our best is still with Max King in the team. It's just about how we wish to implement the way we play with him and the way we play without him. If we can find the best of both worlds, which I think we can, it'll all just be about how we do that in the off season, because obviously our season's over. I think our best footy with him is definitely top 8 worthy, and a lot of hate has gone to him this year. He's still been alright. Still kicked like 2 goals a game, I think. And so the reason why that's my takeaway is because this season's over, and I still see similarities to us with Brett Ratton instead of Ross Lyon, and I think that needs to change, which is what we didn't do under Brett Ratton. My takeaway for Geelong is that Cats need stuff. That's what I wrote. And the reason why I said that is because their midfield is still lackluster, and they're going to be linked with stars. They'll be linked with Oliver, they'll be linked with Petrarca, they'll be linked with Bailey Smith. They've been linked with him for a fair bit now. I think Bailey Smith is obviously the most likely, and he's probably the one most willing to go there. But I don't know if he'd be enough, because Dangerfield potentially only has one more good year left. He was very good in the first half, but dropped away quite significantly after a bit of time was put into him. And I just see that their forward line is okay, but they're just able to take their chances really good. They don't really get enough of them. And then their back line, obviously without Stewart, has been very susceptible. They played him as a full-time mid, and obviously the Saints scored 82 points and a half against them. Or 85 points and a half against them, I think. So there needs to be a bit of improvement there for Geelong, and I think that's where it will come. In the off-season, get some pieces in the midfield, allow Tom Stewart to go back, and that's where the change will come. My voice is starting to really die out now, but the Sunday games will kick off with the Bulldogs, and the key takeaway I have out of a horrible game is that this could be Sam Darcy's breakout finals campaign, where he tortures the competition, because if you look at it, a lot of teams don't necessarily have a genuine matchup for him. If you look at the key defenders, you've got 2 for a fair few teams, but potentially even 1 really, really solid player, A-grader, and then it sort of has a drop-off. And so for the Bulldogs, you've got Norton, Ugle-Hagan and Darcy. If those 3 stay in form till the rest of the year, that could be, they're similar to the Lions, that could be their difference. That could be what makes the Bulldogs true contenders. And if Darcy continues this where he kicks accurately, then he could be the one to really push him, because he is a unicorn, as NBA fans would say. The other Sunday game was Hawks versus Tigers, and honestly, for the Hawks, what I take away is that they are doing a lot of this by committee. Fantastic coaching, fantastic player efforts, fantastic player performance. You've got Newcomb, you've got Meek, you've got Warple in the middle, Nash as well, some younger players on the outside. Cam McKenzie is one. You've got the small forward fleet that have been talked about heaps. Moore, Bruce, Ginnivan, Watson, so many of them. They're all fantastic. And then their backline, aside from Sicily and probably Hardwick, they're not a lot of key names. Carl Amon was a nice pickup. Sam Frost has been on the list for a few years, same as Scrimshaw. But they're doing a fantastic job, and it's all by effort. And now for them, they're going to have the problem of potentially not having Will Day for a final that they will be playing in. I believe they will be playing in it. They showed at the start of the year that they struggled. Do they have the improvement to where now, without him again, they show the improvement and can perform without him? I think they'll get the win this weekend against, I believe it's North Melbourne. I'm hoping they get the win. But they should be able to potentially play better because everyone else has picked up the slack, and it's fantastic from them. But for Richmond, the key takeaway is this mass exodus could be a huge boost to their rebuilding chances. And it's not going to be an easy few years because it looks like it's going to be happening, but it could be the best thing for them in the future. Bolton has technically already requested a trade, although his manager's come out and said that there hasn't been a formal one, but that means that they're looking at it. And Graham is probably moving to West Coast. Baker has shown interest. There's a lot of pieces moving, and for me, it's best if they do move those pieces. Rioli is the other one that I forgot that's off the top of the dome. If they do move it, if they do get 5 or 6 first-round picks like they did in like 2022, but hit them, that's going to set them up for the future perfectly. And then the final game I've got is that Cripps has the biggest backpack to carry, and he's done it for the last 6 years for Carlton. He is a fantastic player. He's one of the best leaders of the competition, leads from the front every single week, similar to Zach Merritt, and he picks up the slack for a lot of Carlton players. 6 outs on the weekend due to injuries, 2 debutants, and he just starts the game off like a house on fire. 5 touches in 3 minutes, and from there you could tell he was not going to let them lose. He was not going to make them miss finals again like they did in 2022. And it's a 3-vote game, and this could very well push him to the top of the Brownlow medal night in 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it is, maybe 4, I don't know. But this could be his night. This could be his year again, and for Carlton this was a huge win as it sets them up very, very well for a finals chance again, and I think they can do a lot of damage. But that is going to be the end of this video. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. I do want to see how this performs because I think I could be doing this for the next couple of years and how I do my review, as I've sort of moved away from the fine margin style. But if you wouldn't mind leaving your thoughts in the comments below first, as I want to hear them, leaving a like on the video if you do enjoy the video really helps push this video in the YouTube algorithm, and then subscribing to my channel as well if you do like this type of content. But with that being said, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you all next time.